Hey, how's it going? We're back again. Going to do a speed run through setting up Postgres and Redis with our simple hosting setup that we had before. We're going to spin up a couple servers, private network, and then we'll get it all running and deployed. So let's check it out. Okay, let's get started by adding the Hetzner resources. As we said, we want to set up a Postgres instance and a Redis instance, but first let's set up a private network so that they can communicate with each other over the internal network and not have to talk to each other via the external network, as well as we don't want Postgres and Redis to have contact with the outside world. We will give them public IPv6 addresses so they can communicate with different things, but if we really wanted to make it extra secure, we could set up a NAT gateway, but all of that gets a little bit complicated. But for now, we're going to create a private network. We're just going to call it the simple host private net. And this is fine. You can obviously choose whatever internal IP address range you want. So let's go back to our original server, go to the networking, go to attach network, and we'll attach the existing network. And then it's set up as 002. So let's go back to the cloud console. Oops, no, let's go back to our project here. Let's go to the servers. Let's add a new server. This will be the Postgres instance. Obviously, I'm choosing US West, same image, same type. You can choose whatever type you want, however big of an instance you want. We don't need to pay for a public IPv4, and we want to attach it to the private network. Again, the most correct, secure way to do this would be to not give it a public IP address at all, set up a NAT gateway, and have it all communicate through that. But it is a little bit more complicated, and we can get almost the same amount of security by setting up a firewall that blocks all of the external connections anyway, so it's fine. Same SSH key. Maybe you want to set a volume to give like yourself 100 terabytes. I don't know, but right now 40 gigabytes is good for us. We don't need to worry about the firewall. We'll add our own firewall later. We want backups, and we'll just call it Postgres, and we'll just buy that. So let's add another one, and let's add Redis here. Again, maybe you want more RAM. That's up to you. Do the same thing. No, I don't care about backups for Redis. So as you see, these are all set up with public IP addresses. Okay, now let's create a firewall so that we can only communicate on the inbound connections and no external entities can reach our important data. So basically what we want to do is any port TCP for 10.0.0.0/16. Can we copy and paste this? And we want TCP, ICMP, and we'll do UDP just for fun. And then that's all we care about. So we create this, and let's just call this puppy internal firewall. And then all we need to do is then apply these to some servers. So let's apply it to Postgres and Redis. And it's done. Okay, now that we have everything locked down, let's work on getting everything set up on the Rails side. Okay, now let's check out the code and figure out what we need to do to get the code working and to get Rails talking to the Postgres, talking to Redis, and all that jazz. So this should look familiar. This is from the first video of our setup, our deployment config. So the first thing we want to do is change the way that Kamal communicates with the servers. So since everything is inside of this internal network, we want to make sure that the SSH is being proxied via the web host, because the web host is the only one that's on the public network. So all we have to do is move this up here to SSH proxy, and it's just a fancy way of getting it to go to one node and then run all the commands from that single node. And from there, we just want to use the internal IP addresses because Kamal will be running from inside the network. So that means we don't have to worry about using external IP addresses, which is great. So we know that I'm going to copy this. So this is the web host. And then since we're going to be running Sidekick, we also want to run some jobs on this host. So let's add that onto here too. You can add different roles for different things that you want to run. This is just going to be, we can just call it Sidekick actually, make it a little bit more easy to understand. And that's also going to be running on this. And there's nothing else we really need to do except update the command that runs our Docker file. And so what we want is just YAML. And then that's going to have web and Sidekick running on the same host. Obviously, if you wanted to separate it out, you could just create another instance and then run Sidekick on there, and then change, obviously, the IP address. So that's pretty straightforward. Now we're running on the internal network for the servers. So that's great. The next thing we want to do is update the accessories. So accessories are what Kamal calls Postgres and Redis. Basically, there are things that you don't want to be restarting every time you deploy a new service. And so I already wrote this out earlier, so we don't have to worry about it too much. But I'll show you how it works from down here. So these are called accessories. And so what the accessories do is they grab the image, and it's basically just like Docker Compose files, if you're familiar with Docker Compose. And so each of these needs to be unique. Each of these names needs to be unique. And I like the idea of adding the version as the suffix here, so that if you wanted to add a new version, you could create that with a new name, like 7.3, for example, and then run them at the same time to check things out, or run one and then decommission the other. So there's a bunch of different things you can do with that. So the only things we really need here is just the hosts. So for the Redis, let's look here. Oh, it's the same. So 4004, and Postgres, which is 003. The image is just Docker image. And the other, options here are, I think, fairly straightforward, but ports, Redis default port, Postgres is on the default port. We're going to call the Postgres user Postgres. The env here is exactly the same as the env down here, which takes the secrets, and you can have clear passwords or clear text secrets as well. It's not a secret, it's just a clear text configuration. And then these Postgres passwords, we're going to pull that in from the .m file. So you can update your .m file and add your Postgres password into it. I'm going to add that now, but I'm not going to show you, so I'll be back in a second. Okay, so we have the Postgres password set in the .m file, and that is all we need to change in this deployment file. So basically, all you need to think about is, nope, I'm wrong. That's not all you need to change. We also need to add the password and the host into the environment for Redis and for Postgres, so that our Rails application knows where these things live, obviously. So let's do this. Redis URL, all this should be pretty straightforward. Postgres host and Postgres user. And then from the secrets, we want the Postgres password. So all we need to do is update the database to be Postgres. Which again, I'm going to cheat here and just copy this over so I don't have to type it all out. Just for production, obviously, usually you want development and tests to be running the same database, but for this simple example, we can not do that. So then we have the database config set up. We need to make sure that obviously we have PG gem. So then let's do a quick bundle. And after that, all we want to do is rerun the Dockerfile generate command. So generate Dockerfile, this will see that we have the Postgres. I don't have the Dockerfile generator in here. Yes. So I add the Dockerfile generator gem, which I like. And you can see it here. Obviously, we can add this into the development block here. But anyway, the Dockerfile Rails gem is a great gem, and it'll just generate the Dockerfile for you. Let's overwrite the one that we already have. And then we can see that what it did was, oh, can't see that. We can look at this, see this. So what we can see is that it added the Postgres client to install and also installs libpqdev, as you can see here, and all the other things that we need to actually install Postgres. So you don't have to worry about it. That's why I like that gem. Okay, now that everything's set up in our config file here, all we need to do is run Kamal setup. This is going to take a while, so we might fast forward through it, but basically what it does is does the same thing it did before, which is go in, install Docker, do everything else like that. So I ran into an error here that I think is a little bit of a gotcha that I think is good to highlight. I updated the env variables, but I didn't do Kamal env push. So you have to run Kamal env push anytime you update the environment variables, or they won't be correctly set on the host. So anyway, now that they are correctly set on the host, we should be able to do Kamal deploy. And this might take a while, so I might fast forward this. Okay, so we got everything deployed finally, and we're finished. So I think we should be good to go. Let's check it out. So I updated the app, this is on localhost, to basically just get some emails so that to show that the Postgres is working, and then I will update the SimpleHost website to have this. And anyone that adds their email, I'll send over all my notes because I have a lot of just text notes that I can send you. And then maybe we'll get something started with some hosting tips, etc. But anyways, this is what it looks like. So let's just see if it's up and running on the real world. It is. So here it is. So I'm going to sign up. And we can see the signups are working. Let's go here and do a quick on the Rails console here. To get a Rails console running, we just run Kamal app exec I, chains interactive. So we're running a Rails console here. I have this called newsletter signups, I believe, sign up. Okay, and we can see we got devs coach, and just to show that we're running on Postgres, we can check this out. Config Postgres pointing at 003. You can see the password here, but I'm going to change it anyway, so you don't have to worry about that. Anyway, we're good to go. I also added the jobs, so we wanted to see if the job's working, so let's check that out. I called it, the role is called Sidekick. And we can see that Sidekick is running correctly. And I created this little job just to show that it's working, which is called notify user job, which just lets me know that a user has signed up. Notify user they signed up, and that's just one. So everything's working, and that's how you get Postgres and Redis set up. Thanks for watching.